Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. This is episode 661. We've got a great guest. It's going to be a great interview. We're going to be talking about content marketing again and digital marketing in general. We've got a really knowledgeable guest. We've got Nat Turner, who's the founder of Tenspeed. He's one of the founding marketing team on Sprout Social. He is a true expert on this. So, Nat, can you quickly introduce yourself to the WP-Tonic tribe?
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to chat through all this today. I was the first marketer at Sprout Social. Spent about 8.5 years there, so I had the opportunity to help kind of build and scale the inbound engine and help the company grow from about 100,000 in ARR to about 100 million in ARR and then IPO. So from there, I did some consulting with a number of SaaS companies, and then co-founded Tenspeed, which is a content optimization agency. So really working with a lot of SaaS and D2C companies on organic growth, so SEO, content marketing, and a little bit of conversion as well. And then we also have a podcast where I'm the host called Content That Grows, and we chat with companies that kind of talk through content they've invested in and how it's helped grow their company. So that's a little bit about me, and like I said, excited to be here.
That's great. And I've got my great co-host and very patient. I've got Stephen. Stephen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, Stephen Souter from hustlefish.com. You've heard me before.
Yes. Before we go into this great interview, we're going to go and have a quick commercial break of our major sponsor. We'll be back in a few moments, folks. We're coming back, and I'd like to point out Castos is offering a great special offer to the tribe, and all you have to do is go to WP-Tonic/recommendations. Not only you'll find a special offer there for Castos, but also some of our ally sponsors and some just general great recommendations if you're looking to build out a WordPress website for yourself or for clients. So, Nat, let's go straight into my first question. So, do you think in the last couple of years, the kind of general marketing, digital marketing, specifically around content marketing, has changed fundamentally anyway, or changed in a specific way before, let's say, the outbreak of the virus?
Yeah, we could talk for a long time about how the pandemic has shifted marketing, but yeah, even outside of that, I would say, certainly when we think about like written content and SEO, the landscape has changed quite a bit in that I think it's continued to be adopted by more and more companies, and therefore, just continues to be more challenging every year. From that standpoint, I think the resurgence of podcasts has been a big factor in how the landscape has changed. Not only just the number of podcasts over the last few years, but the number of companies investing in that as a good marketing channel and a way to generate a lot of content. And then I think, even more recently, some of the like creator economy type of stuff that's really, we've seen a lot of people developing their own, Substack or Patreons with a lot of content coming through there, building their own communities, doing some things there that I think are shifting that and changing the way companies are engaging with folks that are creating content or doing things along those lines. So that would be a few things that I think have changed quite a bit in the last few years.
Yeah, so just a quick follow-through question. So I got from that with podcasting, because I'm big into podcasting like yourself. Mm-hmm. I do 3 podcasts myself a week. Podcasting, YouTube videos, influencer outreach. I think they're the main, and also written blog posts and more detailed white paper content. The landscape's got more competitive, but there seems to be more and more types of content. First of all, would you agree with that? And how do you what has been a successful mix? I know that's a slightly big question, but maybe you can give some quick insight how
Mhm.
you look, what's your attitude towards YouTube podcasting and how you mix it with written content?
Yeah. I mean, I think I certainly can't say that I've been doing it long enough to have my own case study on our work to share as a success story. But I think we can look to a number of other companies and just see that there's I think following and just understanding where people are consuming content and how they're consuming content. So understanding how to utilize things like YouTube or social media. But I think the podcast and generally like episodic content type of things work well. As you know, that you can sort of create this episode or this piece of content, if you will, through a podcast episode, and then be able to kind of break that out and distribute certain parts into YouTube, other parts into social media, and really kind of like give people some more of those short clips and things that they can consume, or just in the format that they like. So people may very well consume full podcast episodes via YouTube if that's just sort of their preference. So I think a number of those certainly play into that. And then I think the folks that do it well understand how to kind of either do thoughtful recaps or roll-ups or different types of ways to integrate podcast or video content into written blog content as well. So we do that with a number of clients that have podcasts, like understanding there was a podcast on this topic. Now there's a written blog post on it, and we can link to it. And that just creates a better experience for anyone who is landing on the site and reading that content, that if they do want to go deeper on that topic, they're able to kind of click through and engage in a different format of video or podcast.
I think one of the really big challenging things, at least in talking to other business owners too, is everyone like can recognize like, yeah, we need content, we need stuff out there so people can engage with us. But the creation of it, like, do you create it internally? Is it something you can outsource? Once it's created, right, you can hire people to distribute it or market it or create social posts. But it seems so many people get stuck in I have an idea of what I want to create. I know what's going to happen after I create it, but it's the creation process itself of the content that people often get stuck on. Is there ways that you can outsource that, or is that something that the company should own internally because you know your audience, you know your product?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a couple ways to think about it. One, when I'm talking with companies, I often will kind of break it down into like thought leadership, very like product centric, product marketing type of content, and then you have more like educational awareness and creative types of content. And I think that thought leadership and product marketing are typically best served to be done internally, because you have that internally, you have all the knowledge on the space, where you're going, the vision, like that's much easier to write about, and obviously the deep product knowledge as well. I do think, and that's where we get kind of brought in a lot of cases, is the informational, educational type of content that's much more, top and middle of funnel is certainly a way that you can like hire that out or work with other folks to help on the execution. When it comes to like podcasts and maybe video, stuff like that, I think those certainly kind of fall in those first couple of buckets, that typically that type of content is going to be in-house as well.
Do you think that most companies would benefit by like hiring like a dedicated content person internally? Or is that something that you can kind of just like, hey, let's put a task on everybody's to-do list once a month to create a piece of content? Like,
Yeah.
if you want to start creating, what's the...
I think you're putting that on the spot. He's about to say higher Tenspeed, isn't it?
Hey, if that's the solution, that's the solution.
Yeah. Well, certainly. I mean, that's always an option. But no, it's a great question. I think it's certainly one of the, like, content as an umbrella, or even content marketing, is huge. So when you don't have some level of ownership, it's sort of that old adage that things that are measured get done or whatever. Like, I think it falls very well into that. Like, if there's no one focusing on it and owning it, I think you have a challenge in really making it a priority. And so we actually, despite like the type of work that we do, I would say the majority of our clients have someone dedicated to content or content marketing in-house. But that person is often very wide and not able to be very deep. So they're covering, sales collateral, they're covering decks, ebooks, webinars, video, blog content, thought leadership, PR. Like they span a lot of content, and then that's where we're able to sort of go deep in the area of sort of SEO content to augment. But yes, very much. I think if it's a priority for you, then that's an important thing to have someone owning it and driving it forward.
That's great. So I think you got on my radar on that because I think you were either interviewed by Rob Rowling or you came on my radar in the Slack group of MicroConf, because I know you do a lot of work for SaaS companies. Mm-hmm. So, is there any consistent patterns around things you see SaaS companies or companies that approach you in general that they're doing consistently wrong, a consistent pattern that you can advise them that they need to change? Is there anything that consistently that comes to your mind that they consistently do wrong?
Yeah, I think there's a few. One is like on the strategy side. Sometimes we come in and the approach has sort of been, we just kind of jump into Ahrefs or SEMrush once in a while and look at topics that have volume, and then we write about them, or we just write about whatever topics people have ideas on, and there's not really like a cohesive strategy to build that forward, like build out on the right topics, establish authority, all of that. From an execution standpoint, I think what we see most is like inconsistency because of just like a lack of bandwidth, or creating good content, but it's just not like formatted and structured well to rank. And so being able to help with that. The third I would say is distribution. Like there's a lot of times we'll see content being created, but it's sort of put on the blog and then that's it. Like there's not a lot of thought or care going into how do we continuously promote? Like we spent the time creating it. How do we keep promoting it? How do we break it up and share it into different channels or things like that? And then the last one I think is pretty big, as people have been going for a little bit longer, not really any attention being paid to existing content and how to re-optimize that. So it's pretty natural for content to increase in performance once it's new and do well, but over time that begins to decay, and there's issues from competition or internal things that cause that, and really requires ongoing attention to your existing content to keep it performing well. So I would say that's the four biggest ones are strategy, execution, distribution, and then existing content.
Oh, that's a fabulous answer. Thanks for that, Nat.
Yep.
We're going to go for our break. When we come back, we've got some other great questions for Nat. We'll see you soon, folks. We're coming back. Just want to point out that if you want to help the show and really engage in the conversation, a great way of doing that is join the WP-Tonic Mastermind Facebook group. Just go to Facebook and look up Mastermind Facebook group, Mastermind WordPress group, I should say. And there's me and plus some of the regular panel on the Friday show, moderate all the content and add it. It's a great community, so join us there. So what are, for the kind of like the MicroConf crowd, they can have funding from angel investors, they're not being fully VC invested. So they've got investment, but it's not millions, and they're looking to get the engine going. Are there any kind of things that you could advise them that they maybe around that first part before we went to the break around strategy, because that's I'm only surmising it, that's probably the thing that they don't think about, is build some strategies. You got any insights around that? Or do you think that's a good question to ask you?
Yeah, it's definitely a good question. I think when a company has less budget, I think there's two main ways that they'll tend to think about it. One is, we still want to do a lot of content, so we're going to try to find the cheapest way to do that, or we want to figure out how to create like good content but a lower volume that kind of still stays within the budget. And so certainly always try to advise people on the second option. I think there's really my thought is always like, do as much as you can do well, whether that's a bandwidth restraint or a budget restraint. So even if that's only publishing 1 or 2 pieces a month, and if that's blog or some other format, like just really focusing on what you can do well in that, and knowing that over time you can build into it later with a budget. So I think that's important. And from a strategy perspective, if you were to talk more written content, I think there's a lot of value in starting pretty close, like topically starting pretty close to your product. So whatever that may be, don't go right about one thing and then another and sort of like all over the place. Like really start in a very narrow set of topics that are very closely tied to your product. And then over time, you can sort of move out from there. But given sort of the level of intent and what people are searching for and some of that, it tends to work well to be starting close to product in terms of topics that you're selecting.
Where does like paid advertising media type stuff fit into this? Like, I know I feel like there's been sentiment that I've seen or read and heard just like around online about people saying that like, oh, content marketing is impossible these days. Like there's just too many people trying to do it. It's all paid. Like if you're going to get results, go paid. And there's people that are like, no, it's like a hybrid thing. Write your articles, pay to promote it, try to get some shares out there to get that SEO up there. But in your mind, like how does it feels like there's been a move to people funneling more money into paid stuff. But that's all anecdotal from my side of stuff. So like, how do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think certainly those two things that you mentioned are what I hear a lot as well. But I think I certain like we have a number of clients that do paid, but they're doing it in a really just an acquisition focus and not necessarily paying to distribute content or anything like that. And they're still able to get good results and get growth. I think one comes down to kind of how you structure your goals and like your expectations of the content. And so depending on what those goals may be, you may see that as a viable option to pay to promote, to hit whatever goals you've set to really be able to have a certain number of people viewing the content. So I think, goals and what your intentions are matter. And then I also just think there's a number of people that say like, not focusing on like, how do I get a lot of people to see my content? It's like, how do I create content worth people's attention, and that they would want to read? And so I think, again, that's a little bit of like perspective, but not like, well, we wrote these 10 blog posts. Now, how do we just make a bunch of people look at it? So I think there's a little bit of that foundational approach and how you're doing that. But yeah, I would say the best examples that I've seen, companies have pretty clearly delineated a certain amount of budget to like performance marketing, very focused on acquisition, very ROI focused, cost per lead, whatever it may be. And then there's sort of another bucket of paid that's very focused on awareness. And that may just be general ads. It may be, YouTube pre-roll video, podcast sponsorships, any of that kind of stuff. And within that, I think I would lump in paying to promote content because you're not really expecting direct leads or conversions to come from that, but you want to distribute the content. And then there's other budget that's really just, content and some other things that you want to invest in. So hopefully that answers your question.
Yeah, for sure. How do you, I guess, kind of just like a follow through here, like whenever you're talking to companies about budget, oftentimes ROI gets brought up. Can you like start thinking through or how, I guess, can you stack up the ROI to a content, like spending whatever it takes to write one blog article versus, $1,000, let's say $1,000 to write an article versus $1,000 to run an ad, just for sake of argument. Like, can you compare those two ROIs and say, this is what you can expect here, this is what you can expect with that ad? Or is it kind of like apples and oranges? And really, we're talking about two distinct marketing channels that are going to hit two different people. And so there's not a whole lot of like direct comparison that can be drawn from that.
Yeah. I mean, to be perfectly honest, anyone that I've chatted with that has like views like the content and SEO through the exact same lens as paid performance, like we don't work with them. It's just you're kind of approaching it immediately with the wrong mindset. But the few things I would say there, one is like in your example of $1,000 in each, the $1,000 can efficiently get you those customers through paid. But once you've done that, and it's over. And if the $1,000 for content can create good content that, works on your site long-term, over 12 months or 24 months or whatever it may be, then you certainly have a longer runway. And when you're doing that every month, creating more content, you're building that up much more. But I also think it's worth noting, like it's pretty common that we see like 85 to 95% of blog posts on a website do not directly generate conversions as like the main landing page. So it is by and large an introductory channel. So it's helping people your post comes up in a search, they read it, they become aware of your company, what you do. And then if they're a fit, sort of move through and eventually convert on other channels. So that's worth noting that like majority of content is not typically like this much traffic came in, this many converted, this is how much we spent on that post, here's the direct ROI. So I think that's typically how we talk through a lot of that and help kind of understand the differences. But the other flip side of that is like you have, if you're doing the distribution point that I mentioned before, that content is also a huge fuel for other marketing. So it's good content that goes in your newsletter. It's good content that sales can send to prospects. It's content that you can break up into a couple, several different social media posts. There's all kinds of stuff you can do with that content as well, versus, like I said, just slapping it on the blog and leaving it there. So yeah, I think it's not as black and white as the paid ROI, but there's certainly a lot there. And I think the companies that understand that and invest in it do well in the long run.
I want to ask you a question about what I call the customer journey. Mm-hmm. When I'm looking at a new product, a new service, I tend to go to Google. I put in some general terms. I do a read up. It really depends on the price point. If it's a service that WP-Tonic's going to use, it's probably in the upper. It's going to be a service provider or a company that provides a service. And I do a bit of a morning, afternoon, a day. I do a bit of what I call a Google dive. Mm-hmm. And I do an extensive search of articles, videos, is this person biased? Is he about affiliate marketing, or is he honest individual? And then I try and write down some of the key things that I need to know about the product to make a judgment call. And then I go to these people's websites and I do a read, and I tend to look over everything they've got to offer. And then I'll make a judgment call around price, feature set, which person Is this what people have to understand? What I'm stating to you, do you think it's what most people are doing now? And based on your experience, what does influence people to do that first outreach when they're looking at 2 to 3 product providers?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that stage you're pretty deep into the process if you're sort of comparing options, and that's where we've seen like, um, thinking about a funnel or buyer journey as like problem, solution, and then like uh, consideration or whatever. It's the problem is like you're literally just Googling terms of how to whatever, like trying to figure out how to solve your problem. And then once you kind of understand, okay, it's whatever, marketing automation platform is what would actually solve it, then you start Googling, best marketing automation platform prices, things like that, reviews. And then eventually you end up at something like HubSpot versus Pardot or HubSpot versus Marketo or things like that that are much more in that intent. So certainly in your example, you're pretty far down that process and that you're already comparing, but that's where we often see a ton of opportunity around the product name and pricing, or creating those competitor pages of one versus the other, and things like that, where it's still kind of targeted to those terms and understanding that stage of the buyer journey, and creating that content that sort of solves what they're looking for and satisfies that search intent. So yeah, I mean, I think that's extremely typical, even with the rise of G2 and Capterra and a number of sites that allow you to kind of do comparison research within their website where you wouldn't see some of those queries. It's still extremely prevalent to have people searching for that in search engines.
Yeah, I find their content to be a bit shallow, as I would call it, like all directory kind of.
Yeah.
And I classify them as kind of quasi directory websites. I got a feeling that, especially with my own website, I'm in the next months I'll be trying to rectify that. Is that we got a lot of block content, but we haven't. I see the real opportunity is what you highlighted. About comparisons, really thinking of the mind of the possible customer, about giving them content that says there's this product and there's ours and these are the good things, and being totally honest and saying this is honestly why we feel you should look at ours. Do you think I'm on the right track?
Yeah, I absolutely. I think that comparison type of content, one versus the other, or even, in the example I gave with marketing automation, like HubSpot alternatives or Marketo alternatives, like that type of search is also, again, someone who's very much, I know of this one, I want to look at how it stacks up against others. And so, yes, doing that, but we certainly always recommend doing it in a very honest way, not trying to kind of hide where the other product may be stronger than you, or it offers more users in a plan or anything like that. I think it's in your best interest to be honest and show that comparison, and know that anyone who does still choose to go with you from that knows what they're getting into and will be happy on the other side of the sale.
Right, I think we'll wrap up the podcast part of the show. Nat's agreed to stay on for some bonus content, which you'll be able to watch the whole interview plus the bonus content on the WP-Tonic YouTube channel and the WP-Tonic website, where there's going to be a full transcription of the interview. If you really want to support the show, give us a review on iTunes. That really helps. And if it's amusing, I will read it out, good or bad. So, Nat, what's the best way for people to find out about you and Tenspeed and find out more about your great knowledge, Nat?
Yeah. So you can find me on LinkedIn. Username I think is Nate Turner 1. And Tenspeed.io is the website for our agency. And then also the podcast that we've been running is called Content That Grows, which you can find that on any and all streaming platforms and YouTube as well.
And Stephen, what's the best way to find out more about you and your company and what you're up to?
Yeah, you can head over to our website, hustlefish.com.
That's great. And what I'm going to be discussing with Nat is more about the journey of Tenspeed itself and what some of the challenges and what's the future of 10 Up. It's going to be a fantastic in the bonus content. But we're wrapping up the podcast and we'll see you next week with another great guest. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye. So, bonus content. So, I watched some of your other previous interviews, and I think you started Tenspeed about a couple of years ago. What have been some of the major challenges of getting the company up, and how have you overcome them to some degree?
Yeah. So we actually just started it in like late 2020 and launched publicly in December of 2020. So we're actually just a little over a year in the running in terms of being publicly launched and going at it. So I would say initially it was the sort of the classic challenge that it was just my co-founder and we were doing everything. And then from there, you really had to kind of go through the process of standing up payroll and benefits and all that stuff as we started hiring folks in April of 2021. And we're now a team of 7 and have grown well. But I would say really until this past quarter, kind of end of 2021, it was just sort of a slow process of like, helping people even understand that we exist and what we do, and at the same time trying to really refine our positioning and details of how we want to describe the services and all of that. So I think it's just a lot of like developing throughout 2021 and kind of helping people understand what we're doing and just in general that we exist. And then really felt like, I think just like end of year planning, you kind of hit a bit of an inflection point in the last quarter and started to get a lot more inbound as well as a lot more referrals and started to pick up from there. So I'd say that's kind of been the few phases we've experienced so far.
So what would you say what are some of the key elements of clientele that you can really help the most? Have you identified some key attributes that lead to clients that you feel that you can really help the most, Nat?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think like seed and Series A stage SaaS companies tend to be a really good fit when they've been doing some content, but they're kind of ready to invest more and start to be more deliberate about it. I think we've had good success there from being a good partner at that stage as well as getting good results and initial traction for them. And we've had good success as well with a little bit later stage growth stage type of companies that maybe have a lot more of the production stuff figured out, but are coming to us for some of that deeper expertise on existing content that I talked about before and be able to optimize that, knowing how to kind of structure the site as it gets bigger, some of those challenges with growth. And then, larger, later stage direct consumer e-commerce companies have also been a good fit, that they are well established, have a pretty strong brand. Products have a lot of history and data around it, and we're able to kind of help create that content with strong product ties to help increase revenue for them. So I would say that's the 3. So seed and Series A SaaS companies, also later stage growth stage SaaS companies, and then late stage direct consumer e-commerce.
What currently, like, you touched briefly about trying to, bring on and onboard like your first set of clients and stuff, being kind of new. Like how, when you are new, and you need some clients right out the gate, but you're also planning on a long-term content strategy play, I'm sure, since you guys are content people. How did you start thinking through that? Like if you're new, you're just getting off the ground, content's going to take a while. What kind of practices you guys put in place, or how did you start marketing right out the gate?
Yeah. We definitely put some attention into creating content. And again, like I mentioned before, like staying really close topically to your product. I think there were a number of topics that we knew we wanted to cover, so that if anyone was considering working with us, reading those topics on our site were things that we wanted to have a viewpoint on. And so we haven't necessarily taken a heavy, write a ton of content, try to scale it up approach, just because I think the thought leadership type of content tends to be much more impactful from the agency side, which is why we ended up starting the podcast as well, and really just an opportunity to talk through people and have good conversations. But so that's kind of where we started, very much like the same things that I mentioned before, like sticking close to the product from a topic standpoint, also doing the thought leadership. And, from there, like I think a lot of our early clients have certainly been referrals, or kind of coming out of some of the consulting engagements I had prior to starting the agency as well, which has really kind of helped start that. And then I would say outside of that, the biggest channel has really been LinkedIn, or just being consistent on there and having people see that and sort of reach out with interest.
Cool. I don't know if you agree with this, but when I was looking over the copy of your own website, you seem to emphasize, and I might be wrong about this, the cost saving of hiring your team compared to having a whole internal team.
Mm-hmm.
Was that something you, as a core, am I correct? Is that one of your core propositions on the website? And did you start with that, or was that something that you learned as the company you were talking to clients? And
yeah, I think, we don't try to like emphasize it too much, because I don't think it ever goes terribly well to lean on cost saving as the primary benefit. But it is I think somewhat core in like our philosophy to that, which is and how it like came to be with creating the company, is that Kevin and I had the opportunity to work together at Sprout Social. A lot of great opportunity building that in-house, scaling that up. Organic was the number one revenue channel, even at the time of leaving. And then from there, he went to Review Trackers, had success scaling their program. And I worked with a number of companies, more broad, sort of growth marketing consulting, but doing a number of content topics. And that's what kind of came to us, was like, this works really well, and it will work really well for smaller companies too. But that is like, you just rarely see a company who's like, immediately, we're just going to hire, SEO and content and writers and all this stuff right out of the gate. And so it typically is like some sort of head of marketing, maybe a broader content person, maybe a paid performer. Like, you start to build it out, but to really have like deep SEO expertise, writing capabilities, and some of the like, understanding of like conversion optimization, how to kind of do some of that stuff, technical SEO. Like, it's typically just not anywhere near the hiring plans for companies. Yet, if they can do it, it works really well for them. So it shouldn't be something that's kind of saved for when you can afford to build out a team of 3 or 4 or 5 people. And that's where we felt like we could create a service that accomplished that for people at a much earlier stage to be able to kind of help them grow.
So I'll go. So just to kind of wrap it up. So What are some of the resources that you think that have influenced you and might be really useful for the audience, i.e. books, personalities, podcasts, apart from your own, obviously? But what are some of the things that you think would give some insights and practical tips, insights that would be useful to the audience? Matt?
Yeah, definitely. I would say two people that I've admired for a long time and continue to follow. One is Ross Hudgens, the CEO of Siege Media. So very, very experienced, very knowledgeable on SEO, content marketing, and just is someone I think has always done a good job of kind of staying ahead of the curve. Another being Rand Fishkin, so founder of Moz and now founder of SparkToro, is another one that I think is willing to go against the grain when he has the right conviction. And I think a lot of the content now that they're putting out from SparkToro is very good.
Well, I think Amanda's doing a fantastic job.
Yes.
Yeah, she's been on the podcast, and
awesome.
Rand's I wouldn't say a close friend, but he's been on the show about 3 or 4 times.
Cool.
I think he's enjoyed the experience. He still talks to me, so
Cool.
some guests don't. But I think I'm really impressed with Amanda and what she's been doing.
Yes.
I think you have, haven't you?
Yes. Yeah, I think so. I was going to say, I think Rand, and maybe it's even her doing the work behind the scenes and he puts his name on it, but I think he still does a lot of his own content. He seems to be putting out, like I said before, like whatever you can do well, he's putting out fewer pieces of content, but they're like very in-depth, how to think about things, sort of forward progressive type of thoughts on marketing and things like that. And then I think Amanda seems to be doing a great job of just really kind of cutting through the noise on a lot of stuff and putting out a lot of great advice herself. So yeah, both of them certainly within that. I would say that's like probably 2 of the biggest influences for sure.
Yeah, I just see them as a great team. I agree with you. I'm not saying in any shape or form Amanda's doing it all. I think Rand just wanted to up the game a bit in content, and I think he found a really good partner, and they seem to get on really well, and they seem to have the same focus and style, don't they?
Yeah, totally agree. And I think for anyone that wants to go deeper into like SEO and content marketing, I think both Ahrefs and SEMrush I think have a lot of great technical type of content as well.
Well, the YouTube channels HF is a bit intense, isn't it? He even loses me. I'm not an expert like you, but I'm a dangerous amateur. I think we wrap it up because you need to go on and do some more writing, don't you, or whatever. But thank you so much for coming on the show. I really enjoyed the interview. Hopefully later on in the year, end of the year, you might agree to come back. That would be great. We're going to wrap it up now, folks, and we'll see you next week for another great interview. We'll see you soon. Bye.